The blue light from the holographic display made Admiral Kim's tired face look ghostly in the dark command center. He had been awake for 36 hours straight, and his eyes burned from staring at screen after screen of tactical data. Coffee in his mug had gone cold hours ago, but he barely noticed when the massive alien figure materialized in front of him. Kim felt his heart skip a beat. The Zephyrian messenger stood nearly 10 feet tall, its body covered in shimmering scales that caught the light like broken glass. 6 arms extended from its torso, each ending in razor-sharp claws that could tear through steel. But it was the creature's eyes that truly unsettled him, for black orbs that seemed to look right through him. Admiral Kim of the Terran Defense. Force. The alien's voice echoed through the chamber like grinding metal. I bring final words from the Zephyrian Collective. Kim straightened his uniform and stepped forward. Behind him, dozens of officers and technicians had stopped their work. To listen, the entire room held its breath. You have 72 standard hours to evacuate the colonies of New Sol, Harmony Station, and Terra Verde. The creature continued without emotion. All human presence must be removed from these systems. Failure to comply will result in immediate pacification measures. The word pacification sent chills down Kim's spine. He knew what it meant in alien military language. Complete destruction of everything human in those systems. Defense Minister Park stepped closer to the communication array. Her face pale, but determined. She had been Kim's friend for over 20 years, and he could see the same thoughts running through her mind. 3 colonies. Over 2 million human lives. Families who had worked for generations to build new homes among the stars. We need more time, Kim said, trying to keep his voice steady. These are civilian settlements with families, children. The hologram flickered and died without warning. The alien messenger vanished, leaving only empty air and the soft hum of the command center's computers. Kim stared at the spot where the creature had been, his hands clenched into fists. In the terrible silence that followed, Park's voice came out as barely a whisper. They're not negotiating, are they? Kim looked around the room at the faces of his officers. Some were young, fresh from the academy, with hope still burning in their eyes. Others were veterans like himself, who had seen what happened when humans trusted to isolate. All of them were looking to him for answers he didn't have. No, he said finally, his voice cutting through the quiet like a blade. They never were. The truth hit everyone at once. This wasn't diplomacy. It wasn't even a real ultimatum. The Zephyrians had already made their decision. They were just giving humanity enough time to suffer, to panic, to beg for mercy that would never come. Kim walked to the main tactical display and pulled up the colony locations. New Sol was home to farming families who grew food for half the outer rim. Harmony Station housed the galaxy's most advanced medical research facility. Terra Verde was where human artists and musicians created beauty that even some alien species had learned to appreciate. All of it would be ash in 3 days. Sir Lieutenant Cho spoke up from her station. What are your orders? Kim looked at the display showing Earth's defense fleet. 47 ships against the collective's thousands. It should have been hopeless. Anyone looking at those numbers would call it suicide. But Kim smiled for the first time in hours. The aliens had made one crucial mistake. They thought they knew everything about human military capability. They had no idea what was really coming. Ambassador Lee's hands shook as she held the datapad, and she hated herself for it. 20 years of diplomatic training, countless negotiations with hostile alien species, and now her body was betraying her when it mattered most. The galactic transmission array hummed with power around her, its crystalline towers reaching toward the ceiling. Like frozen lightning, she had spent the last 18 hours writing and rewriting the surrender document with Earth's greatest minds. Scientists, philosophers, military strategists, all of them had contributed to what might be humanity's final message to the galaxy. The datapad felt heavier than it should, weighted down by the hopes of 2 billion human souls. We offer unconditional surrender, Lee began, her voice echoing through the vast chamber and racing across space at faster than light speeds. She could imagine the words reaching alien ears on 1,000 different worlds, each species listening with their own agenda. The terms were generous beyond belief. Earth's gravitational manipulation technology could reshape entire star systems, turning dead rocks into garden worlds. Their cancer eradication protocols represented centuries of medical research that could save trillions of lives across the galaxy. The atmospheric processors could terraform hostile planets in decades instead of millennia. In addition to evacuating the 3 colonies, Lee continued, humanity will share our gravitational manipulation technology, our cancer eradication protocols, and our atmospheric processors. Through the chamber's transparent walls, she could see the alien delegates in their respective embassy sections. The Andromedon representative, a graceful being with skin like flowing mercury, leaned forward with obvious interest. Their species had been trying to develop gravity manipulation for over 1,000 years. Even the crystalline confederacy showed signs of excitement, though their silicon-based forms rarely displayed emotion. Their crystalline bodies flickered with internal light patterns that Lee had learned to recognize as extreme curiosity. They had been fighting a plague that turned their crystal formations brittle and gray. Earth's medical knowledge could save their entire civilization. We also propose cultural exchange programs, Lee added, her voice growing stronger. Our artists, our scientists, our philosophers, all at your disposal. We seek only to coexist peacefully. The response was immediate and exactly what she had expected. Whispered conversations erupted throughout the diplomatic quarter. Calculating glances were exchanged between species that had been enemies for millennia. She could practically see the alien minds working, weighing the value of human knowledge against their desire to see humanity destroyed. Back in Earth's Defense Command Center, Admiral Kim watched the transmission with his jaw clenched so tight it hurt. The display showed reaction feeds from across the galaxy. Some species were practically drooling over the technological offerings, while others seemed offended by humanity's desperation. Think they'll accept it? Kim asked, though he already knew the answer. Minister Park stood beside him, her face a mask of controlled fury. She had been against this plan from the beginning, calling it a waste of time and dignity. Now, watching the alien delegates discuss humanity's fate like merchants, haggling over goods, she felt vindicated in her pessimism. They've already made their choice, Park said quietly. This is just for the historical record. Kim nodded, his eyes never leaving the screen. The peace offering was real. Every technology, every medical breakthrough, every cultural treasure that Lee had mentioned actually existed. Earth scientists had worked in secret for decades to develop advantages that could benefit all. Galactic civilization. But Kim knew something that the aliens didn't. The surrender was also a test. Humanity was about to learn once and for all whether the galaxy was capable of mercy or if it would reveal its true nature. The answer would determine everything that came next. Lee concluded her transmission with a simple plea. We ask only for the right to exist among you as equals. The chamber fell silent. Now came the waiting. Commander Choi had been having a peaceful morning. The supply manifests were routine paperwork, food shipments, medical supplies, farming equipment for the agricultural domes. New Sol Colony had been his home for 8 years, and he loved the quiet rhythm of life there. Children playing in the bioparks, farmers tending to crops that fed millions across 3 star systems, teachers preparing lessons for the next generation. He was checking inventory numbers for grain shipments when the first blast hit. The entire command center shook like a toy in the hands of an angry child. The coffee cups flew off desks, computer screens flickered and died, and the emergency alarms started screaming. Through the reinforced windows, Choi saw something that made his blood freeze. The massive agricultural dome that housed the Johnson family's wheat farms was simply gone. Where it had stood for 20 years, there was now only a crater of molten rock and twisted metal. All stations, this is Colony Control. Choi grabbed his communicator, his voice cracking with panic. We're under attack. Repeat. We are under the second plasma blast. Hit the communication array directly. The transmission cut to static. leaving only the sound of his own breathing and the distant screams of colonists running for shelter that wouldn't save them. From his position aboard the research vessel Sejong, orbiting the planet's outer moon, Dr. Han watched the horror unfold on his sensor screens. Each blip of light on his display represented a human life: farmers, teachers, children, grandparents who had worked their entire lives to build something beautiful in the darkness of space. The life signs were disappearing one by one. "Dear God," Han whispered, his hands shaking as he tried to focus his instruments. "They're killing everyone." The Zephyrian ships hung in orbit like dark angels of death. Their weapons were precise, methodical, designed to cause maximum suffering. They weren't just destroying the colony, they were making it last. Each dome was targeted individually, giving the people inside just enough time to realize what was happening before the plasma beams turned everything to ash. Ton tried to contact the colony, but there was no response. The communication arrays were gone. Power grid was failing. The life support systems were offline. 30,000 people were dying below. He was helpless to stop it. What made it worse was that the Zephyrians were broadcasting everything. Every scream, every explosion, every moment of terror was being transmitted across all galactic frequencies. They wanted the entire galaxy to watch humanity's destruction. They wanted everyone to see what happened to species that dared to expand beyond their home systems. The bombardment continued for 3 days. 3 days of methodical, calculated murder. The Zephyrians took breaks, letting some colonists think they might survive, before resuming their attack with renewed cruelty. They targeted the schools first, then the hospitals, then the residential areas where families huddled together in their final moments. Han didn't sleep for those 3 days. He recorded everything, documenting each war crime, each violation of galactic law. His eyes burned from staring at the screens, but he couldn't look away. These people deserved to be remembered. Their deaths needed to be witnessed. On the 3rd day, as the last residential complex burned, Han's communication system crackled to life. It was a child's voice, probably no older than 7 or 8, speaking into an emergency communicator from somewhere deep in the colony's underground tunnels. "Mom," the small voice said, filled with confusion and fear. "Why won't they stop? I'm scared. Please make them stop." The transmission lasted only a few seconds before cutting to permanent silence. Han stared at his instruments, watching as the final life signs on New Sol Colony flickered and died. The planet that had been home to 30,000 souls was now nothing but cooling rock and ash dot. The Zephyrians had sent their message. This was the price of human expansion. This was what happened to species that dared to exist alongside the galactic powers, but they had made one crucial mistake. They thought fear would make humanity surrender. Instead, they had just declared war on the most dangerous species in the galaxy. Ambassador Lee's footsteps echoed through the vast corridors, leading to the Galactic Council chamber, each step feeling heavier than the last. She carried with her a briefcase containing evidence that should have been enough to convict the Zephyrians of war crimes: detailed sensor readings, survivor testimonies, holographic recordings of the 3-day massacre at New Sol Colony. But as she entered the massive dome-shaped chamber, Lee could feel the mood in the room. The 47 species assembled here weren't interested in justice. They were excited like spectators at a gladiatorial arena waiting for the final death blow. The chamber itself was a marvel of engineering, designed to accommodate the wildly different needs of dozens of alien species. The crystalline Confederacy representatives stood on platforms that vibrated at frequencies that kept their silicon-based bodies stable. The gas-breathing Nebula Collective floated in translucent spheres filled with methane. The insectoid hive queens perched on specially designed platforms that could support their massive egg sacs. And at the center of it all, the Zephyrian delegation sat in their reserved section, their crystalline wings reflecting the chamber's lights like broken mirrors. They weren't even pretending to look concerned about the accusations against them. "Honored delegates," Lee began, her voice carrying clearly through the chamber's acoustic enhancement system. She had practiced this speech 100 times, but now the words felt hollow in her mouth. New Sol Colony was purely agricultural. We have documentation proving no military installations, no weapons development. These were farmers. She activated her holographic display, showing images of the colony before the attack. Children playing in bioparks. Elderly couples tending to flower gardens. Farmers harvesting crops that fed millions across 3-star systems. The images were beautiful, peaceful, completely innocent. The Zephyrian delegation responded with dismissive, chittering sounds that their translation devices rendered as something like contemptuous laughter. One of their representatives, a creature with 4 arms and eyes like black diamonds, made a gesture that Lee recognized as the equivalent of a human shrug. "The evidence is overwhelming," Lee continued, her voice growing stronger with desperation. 30,000 civilians were systematically murdered over 3 days. This wasn't a military action, it was genocide. More chittering from the Zephyrians. Some of the other species were whispering among themselves, but Lee could see in their body language that they had already made up their minds. The council's speaker, a massive aquatic being called Depsinger Corvash, floated in a pressure suit filled with purple liquid. Its voice resonated through the chamber like whale song passed through a synthesizer. "The evidence has been reviewed," Corvash announced, its tentacles making complex patterns that Lee had learned to recognize as formal diplomatic language. "The matter is simple. We vote now on intervention in the human-Sephorian conflict." Lee felt her heart pounding. This was it. The moment that would determine whether the galaxy had any sense of justice left, or whether humanity truly stood alone. "In favor of intervention," Corvash's voice boomed. The chamber remained perfectly still. Not a single appendage rose. Not one claw, tentacle, or manipulator arm moved to support humanity's cause. Even the species that had seemed sympathetic to human plight in the past now sat in silence. Opposed to intervention? The response was immediate and devastating. A forest of claws, tentacles, and manipulator arms filled the air. The vote was unanimous, 47 species against humanity, 0 in favor. Lee stood at the podium, stunned by the complete rejection. She had known it was unlikely, but some part of her had hoped that basic decency would prevail. Instead, she was staring at the true face of galactic civilization cold, calculating and utterly without mercy. As she gathered her documents and prepared to leave, the sound that followed her out of the chamber was the worst part of all. Laughter. Not just from the Zephyrians, but from dozens of different species. Their alien voices mixing together in a symphony of cruel amusement. The galaxy had just signed its own death warrant. They just didn't know it yet. Admiral Kim stood in the communication center, surrounded by banks of equipment that had carried humanity's voice to the stars for 3 centuries. The room was empty except for him. He had dismissed all the technicians and officers. This message needed to come from him alone, carrying the weight of every human heart that had ever hoped for peace among the stars. His hand trembled slightly as it hovered over the transmission controls. Once he activated the system, there would be no going back. The words he was about to speak would echo across the galaxy, reaching every alien ear from the core worlds to the outer rim. Earth's greatest writers, philosophers, and strategists had spent days crafting this message, choosing each word like a weapon. The transmission array hummed to life around him, its crystalline towers glowing with energy that would push his voice, faster than light itself. Kim took a deep breath, thinking of all the humans who had died, believing in a better future. "This is Admiral Kim of the Terran Defense Force," he began, his voice steady and clear. The words traveled instantly across space, reaching alien listeners on 1,000 different worlds. "For 300 years, we offered you peace. We offered you friendship. We offered you everything we had." Paused. And in that silence, he could almost hear the ghosts of New Soul Colony. The farmers who had worked the soil under alien suns. The teachers who had educated human children to be better than their parents. The children themselves, whose final words still echoed in his mind. "We shared our knowledge, our culture, our hopes for a better universe," Kim continued, his voice growing stronger with each word. "We gave you medical advances that saved billions of lives. We showed you technologies that could transform dead worlds into gardens. We opened our hearts and our minds to you, asking for nothing but the right to exist alongside you." The transmission array pulsed with power, broadcasting his words to every corner of known space. He imagined the alien delegates listening, perhaps, celebrating what they thought was humanity's final surrender. They had no idea what was really coming. "We built colonies that harmed no one," Kim said, his voice hardening like steel. "We raised children who dreamed of befriending your children. We created art that some of you even learned to appreciate. We reached out our hands in friendship again and again, despite every rejection." The images flashed through his mind Ambassador Lee's desperate plea to the Galactic Council. The peaceful surrender offer that had been ignored. The 3 days of systematic murder at New Sol. All of it had been recorded, documented, broadcast across the galaxy as a warning to other species about the price of defying the established order. "We asked only for the right to exist," Kim continued, his voice now carrying an edge that would make alien listeners nervous. "We begged for mercy for our children. We offered you our greatest treasures in exchange for peace." The silence in the communication center was absolute. Outside, Earth's defense fleet was already moving, though the galaxy didn't know it yet. Hidden weapons systems were coming online. Sleeper agents were activating. The machinery of war that had been hidden for centuries was finally awakening. "If this is how you answer peace." Kim's voice dropped to a whisper that somehow carried more menace than any shout, "then you'll regret this war." He reached forward and shut down the transmission array. The crystalline towers went dark, their glow fading like dying stars. Earth's communication networks went silent, cutting off all contact with the outside galaxy. Across known space, alien species began to celebrate. The human nuisance was finally over. The annoying voices asking for peace and friendship had been silenced. The galaxy could return to its natural order of the strong dominating the weak. They had no idea that humanity had just removed its mask. For 3 centuries, Earth had been playing the role of the peaceful neighbor, the harmless friend, the weak species that needed protection. But that had all been an act. Now, they were about to meet the real humanity. The galaxy would never be the same. General Rue had been waiting for this moment for 30 years. His fingers moved across the holographic controls with practiced precision, each gesture activating systems that had been dormant for centuries. The command center around him hummed with activity as screens flickered to life, showing status reports. From across the galaxy, what the aliens had dismissed as abandoned mining stations were suddenly coming online. These structures, hidden beneath layers of asteroid dust and cosmic debris, had been sleeping like dragons in their caves. For 300 years, they had drifted through space, looking like nothing more than dead rocks and abandoned equipment, but they were so much more. Phoenix Protocol is active. Captain Yoon reported from her station in the hidden command center, buried 3 miles beneath the Antarctic ice. Her voice carried across the secure communication network to similar facilities hidden on every human world. All ghost fleets responding. The room erupted in controlled chaos as officers began coordinating the largest military operation in human history. Display screens showed tactical maps of 50 star systems, each one marked with symbols that would have terrified any alien observer who understood their meaning. For centuries, the galaxy had watched humanity's modest fleet with amusement. 47 ships, most of them obviously civilian vessels, construction ships, supply transports, research vessels. The aliens had laughed at humanity's pathetic military capability. Even the most generous estimates had placed human military strength at maybe 200 ships total. They had been so very wrong. "How many ships are we talking about?" Dr. Shin asked, her voice filled with anticipation. As head of the secret weapons program, she had spent her entire career preparing for this day. The technologies she had developed in hidden laboratories were about to change the balance of power in the galaxy forever. General Rue's smile was colder than the Antarctic ice above their heads. 12,000 vessels, he said, his voice carrying the satisfaction of a man who had kept the galaxy's greatest secret for 3 decades. Each one carrying technology that makes the Zephyrians look like children playing with sticks. Across the galaxy, things that had been still for centuries began to move. In the asteroid belt of the Proxima system, chunks of rock that had drifted, for decades suddenly revealed themselves as massive battleships. The mining equipment attached to their hulls fell away like broken shells, revealing weapons that could crack planets, in the shadow of the gas giant Kepler-4 to be what had appeared. To be a research station monitoring solar winds suddenly extended massive weapon arrays. The structure was larger than most alien space stations, but it had been hidden in the planet's magnetic field for 200 years, near the Vega system. A nebula that had been marked on star charts as a natural phenomenon began to part like curtains. The ionized gas had been artificially maintained to hide an entire battle fleet, 300 ships, that had waited in perfect silence for this moment. Dr. Shin watched the activation reports flood in, her heart pounding with excitement. "The Yamato-class dreadnoughts are online," she reported. "Quantum torpedo systems are armed. Particle beam networks are charging." Each ship that revealed itself was a masterpiece of human engineering. While the aliens had been content with their energy weapons and plasma cannons, humanity had pushed the boundaries of physics itself. Their weapons could manipulate spacetime, create artificial black holes, and fire projectiles that existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously. "What about the planetary defense systems?" Rue asked. "All active," Captain Yoon replied. "The orbital platforms around Earth, Mars, and the outer colonies are fully operational. The asteroid fortresses are moving into position." The countdown had begun. Across 50 star systems, human technology that had been hidden for centuries was awakening. The galaxy had made its choice when it laughed at humanity's peaceful surrender. Now they would learn what happened when you awakened a sleeping giant. The aliens thought they had one. They had no idea that the real war was just beginning. General Rue had been waiting in this underground bunker for 15 years, and every single day had been leading to this moment. His fingers moved across the holographic controls like a pianist, playing a deadly symphony. Each touch activated systems that had been sleeping in the cold darkness of space for longer than most humans had been alive. The command center buzzed with nervous energy. Officers who had trained their entire lives for a war they weren't sure would ever come suddenly found themselves at the center of the galaxy's most important moment. Display screens flickered to life around the circular room, showing star maps. That would have confused any alien observer. What looked like abandoned? Mining stations scattered across 50 star systems were suddenly waking up. These structures had drifted through space for centuries, covered in layers of asteroid dust and cosmic debris, to passing alien ships. They looked like nothing more than dead equipment left behind by early human expansion efforts. The aliens had been so wrong. "Phoenix Protocol is active," Captain Yoon reported from her station, her voice steady despite the magnitude of what they were unleashing. The hidden command center buried 3 miles beneath Antarctica's ice was connected to similar facilities. On every human world, all ghost fleets responding. The word sent a chill through the room. Ghost fleets. That's what they called the massive armadas that had been hidden in plain sight for 300 years. While the galaxy watched humanity's pathetic collection of 47 ships, they had no idea that thousands of warships were sleeping in asteroid fields, gas giant shadows, and nebular clouds. Dr. Shin looked up from her weapons control station, her face pale with excitement and fear. As head of the secret weapons program, she had spent 20 years developing technologies that violated half the galactic treaties on warfare. "How many ships are we talking about?" she asked, though she already knew the answer. General Rue's smile was colder than the Antarctic ice above their heads. 12,000 vessels, he said, his voice carrying the satisfaction of a man who had kept the galaxy's greatest secret. Each one carrying technology that makes the Zephyrians look like children playing with sticks. The number hung in the air like a death sentence. 12,000 ships. The entire Zephyrian collective had maybe 3,000 vessels total. The combined fleets of all 47 galactic species barely reached 10,000 ships. Humanity had been hiding a military force larger than anything the galaxy had ever seen. Across the known universe, things that had been still for centuries began to move. In the Kepler system, chunks of rock that had drifted aimlessly for decades suddenly revealed themselves as massive battleships. The mining equipment attached to their hulls fell away like broken shells. revealing weapons that could turn planets into dust, near the gas giant Titan 7. What had appeared to be a weather monitoring station suddenly extended weapon arrays, the size of city blocks. The structure had been hidden in the planet's magnetic field for 200 years, disguised as scientific equipment studying atmospheric patterns in the Horsehead Nebula. Ionized gas clouds that had been marked on star charts as natural phenomena began to part like curtains. The nebula itself had been artificially maintained to hide an entire battle fleet. 400 ships that had waited in perfect silence for this moment. Captain Yoon's voice cut through the tension. "Sir, we're receiving confirmation signals. From all sectors, the Yamada-class dreadnoughts are online. Quantum torpedo systems are armed. The reality shear weapons are charging." Each ship that revealed itself represented decades of secret development. While aliens had been content with their energy weapons and plasma cannons, humanity had pushed the boundaries of physics itself. Their weapons could fold space, create artificial black holes, and fire projectiles that existed in multiple dimensions. The countdown had begun. After 3 centuries of pretending to be weak, humanity was finally showing its true face. The galaxy was about to learn what happened when you murdered human children and laughed about it. The sleeping giant was awake. It was very, very angry. The Zephyrian homeworld had been considered unconquerable for over 1,000 years. Its defense grid consisted of orbital platforms that could destroy entire fleets, energy shields that had never been penetrated, and weapon systems that had reduced countless enemy armadas to cosmic dust. While the planet's crystalline cities stretched across 3 continents, housing billions of the galaxy's most feared warriors, Commander Tay watched it all die in 6 hours. From the bridge of the human dreadnought Gwanggaedo, he had a perfect view of the destruction. The ship's name honored an ancient Korean king, but the vessel itself was something from humanity's darkest imagination. Its hull was black as space itself, and its weapon systems hummed with technologies that shouldn't have existed. "Sir, detecting incoming transmission from the planet's surface," Lieutenant Nam reported from his station. The young officer's voice was tight with disbelief. They're surrendering." Tay nodded grimly. The Zephyrian defense grid had detected the first human vessel at exactly 1432 Galactic Standard Time. By 2032, the planet was in ruins. The orbital platforms that had protected the homeworld for a millennium had been reduced to glowing debris. The energy shields that had never been breached had simply stopped existing. "Their entire fleet is gone," Nam continued, his voice filled with awe. "The homeworld isn't responding to any transmissions. I think we destroyed everything." The human weapons had been unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. Instead of simply hitting their targets, they seemed to erase them from reality. The Zephyrian ships didn't explode, they just ceased to exist, leaving behind empty space where mighty warships had been moments before, across the galaxy. The same scene was playing out on dozens of worlds. The Crystalline Confederacy's famous crystal, cities grown over centuries and considered unbreakable, shattered like glass under weapons that manipulated molecular bonds. The Andromedan Empire's star fortresses, massive structures that had withstood siege for decades, crumbled under weapons that bent space itself. The speed was terrifying. Species that had dominated the galaxy for millennia were falling in hours. The Hive Queen's nest worlds went silent. The aquatic collective's ocean planets boiled away. The machine intelligence's factory worlds simply stopped functioning. Meanwhile, Minister Park walked through the corridors of the Galactic Council building, her footsteps echoing in the empty halls. The massive structure that had once bustled with alien diplomats and their entourages was now eerily quiet. Emergency lighting cast long shadows on the walls. The air recycling systems hummed with mechanical loneliness. She entered the main chamber where, just days ago, 47 species had voted unanimously against helping humanity. The circular room with its towering dome felt like a tomb now. The viewing galleries were empty, the delegate platforms abandoned, the great seal of galactic unity looking foolish in the dim light. But she wasn't alone, eh? A single human marine stepped out of the shadows near the speaker's podium. Private Kong had been waiting there for hours, his rifle held at ease but ready. He was young, maybe 25, with the calm eyes of someone who had seen too much death in too short a time. "Ma'am," Kong saluted as Park approached. "The building has been secure for the past 4 hours. We've been waiting for your arrival." Park looked around the empty chamber, remembering the laughter that had followed her desperate plea for justice. "Any resistance?" "None, ma'am." The security forces abandoned their posts when the orbital bombardment began. Most of the diplomatic staff evacuated in the first hour. Through the chamber's transparent walls, Park could see the space above the planet. What had once been a mighty fleet of Zephyrian warships was now nothing but glowing debris. The vessels that had murdered 30,000 humans at New Sol Colony had been reduced to scrap metal drifting in the void. "And the council members?" Park asked, though she already suspected the answer. "Evacuated, ma'am," Kong replied with a slight smile. "They left behind a request for immediate peace negotiations. Apparently, they're very interested in discussing terms." Park nodded, feeling a cold satisfaction settle in her chest. The galaxy had laughed at humanity's peaceful surrender. They had celebrated the murder of human children. They had voted unanimously to let genocide continue. Now they wanted to talk about peace. The storm had broken across the galaxy. Humanity was no longer asking for permission to exist. They were taking it. The trial chamber had been built inside what was once the Zephyrian Emperor's private palace. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. The same ornate halls where alien rulers had once planned humanity's destruction now served as a courthouse for their own judgment. The room was smaller than the old council dome, but the weight of justice made it feel infinitely more important. Ambassador Lee stood at the prosecutor's podium, her appearance transformed by the events of the past months. The woman who had once begged for mercy with trembling hands now carried herself with the quiet authority of someone who had seen evil punished. Her new title, Chief Prosecutor for War Crimes, was embroidered on her uniform in gold thread. "The charges are genocide, unprovoked aggression, and crimes against sentient beings," Lee announced, her voice carrying clearly through the chamber's silence. "The evidence is overwhelming." Before her, arranged in a semicircle of containment fields, sat the leaders of 47 species. These were the same beings who had laughed at humanity's peaceful surrender, who had voted unanimously against intervention, who had celebrated the murder of human children. Now they sat in energy cages, their proud forms diminished by defeat. The Zephyrian Emperor, once the most feared ruler in the galaxy, cowered in his containment field. His crystalline wings, which had once spread wide in displays of dominance, now hung limp and broken. His forearms were shackled with energy bonds. That prevented him from making even the smallest threatening gesture. "We have holographic evidence of the 3-day bombardment of New Sol Colony," Lee continued, activating a display that showed the systematic murder of 30,000 civilians. "We have recorded communications proving premeditation. We have testimony from survivors who witnessed the deliberate targeting of schools and hospitals." The evidence was damning. Every war crime had been broadcast across the galaxy by the Zephyrians themselves, who had wanted the universe to witness humanity's suffering. Now those same recordings served as proof of their guilt. Around the Emperor, other alien leaders awaited their fate. The Crystalline Confederacy's prime resonator, whose people had once seemed the most reasonable, had voted against human intervention with calculated coldness. The Andromedon High Chancellor, whose species had benefited from human medical advances, had chosen genocide over gratitude. "The sentence is simple," Lee announced, her voice growing stronger with each word. "Complete reparations to human colonies, permanent non-aggression pacts, and the establishment of human monitoring stations in every major system." The aliens shifted uncomfortably in their containment fields. The sentence was lighter than they had feared, but far heavier than they had hoped. They would survive, but they would never again be free to terrorize weaker species. The chamber doors opened, and Admiral Kim entered with measured steps. His uniform now bore new insignia, the stars and stripes of the Supreme Commander of Galactic Defense Forces. The title had been created specifically for him, recognizing that humanity now held ultimate responsibility for maintaining peace in the galaxy. "The galaxy wanted to see what humans do when pushed to war," Kim announced, his voice echoing through the chamber. "Now you know. We don't fight for conquest. We fight for justice. He walked slowly past the containment fields, looking each alien leader in the eye. Some tried to meet his gaze with defiance. Others looked away in shame. All of them understood that their old world was gone forever. For 3 centuries, we asked for nothing but the right to exist, Kim continued. You could have had us as friends, as partners, as allies. Instead, you chose to make us your judges. The assembly sat in stunned silence. They had awakened something they couldn't control, not just humanity's military might, but their sense of justice. The humans weren't interested in ruling the galaxy through fear. They wanted to create a universe where species like the farmers of New Sol Colony could live in peace, but they would never again trust that peace to alien mercy. The reckoning had come. It was absolute. Dr. Shin stood on the observation deck of the new Terran embassy, her hands pressed against the reinforced glass as she watched the daily parade of submission below. The massive space station orbited what had once been the Galactic Council's headquarters, but now served as humanity's administrative center for the known galaxy through the viewport. She could see alien ships of every design imaginable lined up in perfect formation, waiting for their mandatory inspections. Zephyrian cruisers with their broken crystalline wings, Andromedon vessels that gleamed like liquid mercury, even the proud crystalline Confederacy ships, their once brilliant surfaces now dulled by defeat. Each ship carried documentation proving they had no weapons beyond basic defensive systems. Each crew had been vetted by human intelligence services. Each cargo hold had been scanned for contraband. The galaxy that had once mocked humanity's weakness now submitted to their authority without question. The monitoring stations are fully operational, Captain Yoon reported from her position at the command console. The woman had aged visibly in the months since the war ended, but her voice carried the satisfaction of someone who had lived to see justice done. Every major system now has a human presence. Shin nodded, thinking about those monitoring stations. They weren't just military outposts. They were symbols of the new reality. Humanity had learned that peace couldn't be trusted to alien goodwill. From now on, human eyes would watch every star system. Human sensors would monitor every fleet movement. And human weapons would ensure that genocide would never again be tolerated. Through the viewport, she could see something that made her heart both heavy and proud. In the distance, where New Sol Colony had once flourished, a memorial station hung in space like a crystal tear. The names of 30,000 farmers, teachers, and children were etched in quantum crystal, visible from space to any ship that passed by. The memorial served as both a reminder and a warning. It reminded humanity why they could never again trust in alien mercy. And it warned any species considering aggression what the price of human blood truly was. Any word from the Outer Rim? Shin asked, turning away from the window. Species have requested to join the Terran Protection Zone, Yoon replied with a slight smile. The Spiral Collective, the Ring Builders, and something called the Harmony Singers. They're offering tribute in exchange for security guarantees. Shook her head in amazement. 6 months ago, these same species would have laughed at the idea of humans protecting anyone. Now, they were lining up to place themselves under human authority, offering their most precious resources in exchange for the promise that humanity would defend them from other galactic powers. The galaxy had learned to fear human vengeance. More importantly, they had learned to respect human justice. The old order where might made right was dead. In its place, humanity had created something unprecedented. A galactic government based on law rather than force. Justice rather than power. What's our new motto? Asked Ensign Ko, a young officer who had joined the diplomatic corps after the war. She was part of a new generation of humans who would never know what it felt like to beg aliens for the right to exist. Shin smiled, remembering the words Admiral Kim had spoken to the first Zephyrian fleet that had surrendered. The aliens had expected brutal terms, mass executions, the complete destruction of their civilization. Instead, Kim had offered them something they had never given humanity: mercy. We preferred to speak softly, Shin quoted, her voice carrying across the observation deck. You forced us to use the stick. The new galactic order was everything humanity had dreamed of when they first reached for the stars. It was peaceful, with conflicts resolved through law rather than war. It was prosperous, with trade flowing freely between systems under human protection, and above all, it was just no species would ever again be allowed to commit genocide while the galaxy watched and laughed, and it would remain so because humanity was watching forever.